Hey all, in this tutorial I'll be taking you through making use of Story Framework's dialogue system and setting up your own NPCs to make use of said dialogue system. So let's take a dive into this right away. We're going to start from the bottom and work our way up. So the new reworked dialogue system in Story Framework 5 allows for essentially any blueprint class to be used as an NPC or a actor that has dialogue. So let's go ahead and create a new blueprint class. We'll pick the character class and we'll just call this example NPC underscore BP, and we can drag this into our level. Let's go ahead and open up the example NPC and let's start setting up the dialogue for this NPC. So firstly, let's go up to class settings. Underneath implemented interfaces, we can search for dialogue info underscore BPI. Once we've added that interface, we'll notice that we now have a few blueprint interface events that can be used. So on update owner dialogue data, if we right click and create implement event, we can store this in the event graph for our NPC. Next up, we have get owner dialogue components and we have get owner dialogue data. So if we double click and open up get owner dialogue data off of our NPC info, I like to promote this to a variable and expose this variable by clicking on the little eye icon next to the variable. So this variable will contain all of the information for our NPC, which I will show in a sec. If we go and open up the get owner dialogue component, we can plug in a dialogue manager actor component here. So underneath the components, we can hit add and search for dialogue manager AC. Then we can just simply drag that out and plug it into the dialogue manager. There's nothing specific we need to change on the dialogue manager. We just need to simply add that component to our NPC or our actor that we are giving dialogue to. Now that we've got that set up, we can also just quickly assign a mesh to our example character. So we have our NPC in the level. By default, this actor is not receiving any interaction as it does not implement the interaction interface for Story Framework specifically. What I've just shown now was specific to setting up NPCs. Now that we've got the basics of our NPC data all set up, with the NPC info structure that we've created, we can also plug this into the update owner dialogue data. So now whenever we attempt to update our NPC's dialogue information, it will be setting that variable that we created that's also being used on the get owner dialogue data. So it's a pretty simple method to keep everything all interconnected and intertwined, and allows for the dialogue manager actor component to reference all this information easily. So we don't have any current way of executing our dialogue. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use a begin play with a small delay. We'll set the delay to 2 seconds. We can drag out our dialogue manager actor component and search for start conversation. So this is how we would initiate conversation with our NPC. We can hit compile and save. And we can go ahead and start setting up our NPC info. So this is the structure that we've exposed earlier. If we drop down NPC info and name info, we have an NPC ID, their display name, and a name color. So we'll leave the name color white. We'll give the ID Billy, and the display name will be Billy as well. Next up, we're prompted to assign a dialogue data table. So if we open up our content browser, if we go to Story Framework, Core, Dialogue, and Dialogue Tables, we'll notice we have our different NPCs over here and their dialogue datas. We are already using Billy, so we will just change this name now, just so that we don't conflict. We'll change this to Yuri, and the display name will be Yuri. Now back into our content browser, by dialog tables, we can just add a new folder over here for Yuri. If we right click, we can search, or underneath miscellaneous, we can click on data table, and the structure we are looking for is reply info _s. Do make sure that the row structure that you're choosing for your dialog data table is reply info _s. It is important that we're using this exact structure. We can hit OK, and we'll call this Yuri dialog _dt, and we can hit save, and we can plug this into our NPC's dialog data table. So if we double click on our Yuri dialog data table and open it up, if we add a new row, we can start diving into some of these options. So we are setting up the first reply for our NPC. The reply type can be start conversation. We get prompted to display replies after the NPC has spoken. So we'll just display a single reply, which we'll call test, or rather, hey there. We have options to define animations for our NPC. And underneath voice lines, we have options to display subtitles and the sound alongside the subtitles. So we'll just use the demo speech cue. And the subtitle text will be, hey there, stranger, which will be on screen for 2 seconds, just a single subtitle line. Underneath other, we also have the option to display summary after. So this is useful if the NPC has, say, a more lengthy dialogue that they are speaking out before the player gets to reply. So for this example, we'll just say Yuri said hi, just to demonstrate. So we can hit save and test this out. So if we hit play, after 2 seconds, our conversation should start with Yuri. As we can see, Yuri says, hey there, stranger. We get the summary on the left side and the reply option. If we select this, it's going to kick us out the dialogue because we have nothing else set up. So from here, we're now going to dive into connecting up our replies inside this data table. So if we hit add, we can change the if reply is chosen field to be hi there. So if you can remember, or it was rather hey there. So if you can remember, we added the display replies after, and one of them was hey there. So we're now connecting that specific reply when the player chooses that reply to prompt this next row of data. So if that reply is chosen, we can leave the reply type as default. We can then say after that, the next reply will be cool beans, or tell me more. Once again, we'll just give this the demo speech. You would be setting up your own voice lines for your character here. Let's say Yuri asks our player, how are they today? Or rather, how are you today? Which once again will be on screen for 2 seconds. And we could say Yuri asked about your day as the summary. Summaries aren't necessary. You should be using them as you feel necessary. So if we go ahead and test this now. If we start conversation and we select hey there, we can see now it's now connected up to that second row that we created in our data table. And Yuri asked, how are we today? And this same sort of principle would continue to create your sort of own dialogue tree for Yuri. This is the premises of how this would work. This is the simplest implementation of NPCs and dialogue using Story Framework's dialogue system. We are now going to jump into some more complex use cases by making use of the dialogue graph actor. Before we jump into making use of the dialogue graph actor, I do first want to make mention of some other features of NPCs. So underneath our NPC infrastructure, underneath other, we have camera effect and we have is dialogue skippable. Obviously, if is dialogue skippable is set to true, then the player will be able to skip through dialogue spoken by the NPC. Underneath camera effect, we have three options here. We have focus on head, use actor camera, and no camera effects. So focus on head, if we hit play, we can see when conversation starts, our camera focuses towards the NPC's head. If we are setting up a actor that doesn't contain a skeletal mesh with the bone name of head, then the actor's origin will be focused on instead. For use actor camera, we can assign a camera component inside of our NPC to be used. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this now. We can simply use a camera component as the actor camera. So if we double click on that camera actor, we can drag it around our scene and we can place it on our NPC. If we start conversation, we'll now use that view. This is a simple way of using custom cameras. A more streamlined approach that is more interconnected into the dialogue system itself is making use of Story Framework's dialogue cameras. So this little example here demonstrates a small network of these cameras, and I'll go ahead and show you how these are set up now. So if we edit our NPC once again, we can delete our camera component. If we hit add, we can search for dialogue NPC camera CC or camera component. If we hit compile and save, we can now instead modify some properties on this camera specifically instead of a default camera component. So for instance, if we lower the FOV, I'll demonstrate some cool effects that we can do using this dialogue camera. We can change the simple animation type. So we have a few different animations that we can make use of here. So for instance, let's choose zoom in. Let's lower the play rate of this animation down to, let's say, 0.2 and hit play. We can see now when we focus on this camera, we have a slight zoom in effect while the NPC is speaking. I like to keep the play rate of these animations relatively low, as we don't want them to be too harsh. They are intended to be a subtle effect on the camera. So as we can see, we are snapping to that camera's view, but when we get prompted our reply options, we are snapping back to our player's view instead. What we can go ahead and do is set up a dialogue player camera. So if we open up our content folder inside Story Framework, core, dialogue, blueprints, we have the dialogue player camera _BP. So this dialogue camera connects up to a specific NPC, and when the player is prompted replies from that NPC, this camera's view will be used if that NPC is using custom cameras. So once again, if we double click on our camera component, we can lower the FOV down. We can sort of position this over the shoulder of our character. We have a small little camera shake effect that I like to leave enabled. We also have options to set the player's location when this camera view becomes the player's view target. And then we also have the assign to ID. So if you can remember, we set up the ID for this NPC to be Yuri. So if we copy that over and we paste that into the assign ID, we can see our actor is now connected up to our NPC. So if we go to hit play and test this, we can see we snap to that view when the player is prompted reply options. So this is how we can set up custom view angles when we are in dialogue, and a good few examples are found throughout Story Framework's example map. So now let's hop into making use of the dialogue graph actor. If you don't have one of these placed in your level yet, you can drag one out. In the example map, we already have one placed here. So with them placed, or with one placed in your level, you can double click and open this up. And this is where we can start assigning more intricate reply actions to our NPCs. So we'll start with the basics. Inside our dialogue graph, so over on the left hand side, we have the dialogue graph. On the out or at the end of any previous setups here, we can see we have the set dialogue collapse node. So this is our initialize event. And then at the end, if you're not using, or if you're not testing this in the example map, you can remove this graph. But for this example, we're going to leave it here as we are in the example map. On the out, we can start creating custom logic for our NPC. So we can drag off underneath the macros, underneath dialogue nodes, we can drag off get NPC. So this is how we're going to reference our NPC that we are applying these reply actions to. Our ID is Yuri. And immediately we can start creating some custom logic for our NPC. So let's drag out the redirect conversation, for instance. If the reply chosen is cool beans, we want to go to the, let's have a look at what we have here. We have hey there. Let's say we want to go back to hey there. So this would essentially create a loop in our conversation when we select cool beans. We do want to apply this or apply these reply actions to our NPC. So once we've got all our nodes set up and we're happy with how everything is set up, we can drag off apply dialogue actions and connect that up. So the premises of this is we get a reference to our NPC, we set up the different actions, and we apply those dialogue actions. So if we hit compile and save and test this out, we start conversation with Yuri and we select hey there and we select cool beans. We are now looping back to hey there. So we're looping back to when the player selects the hey there reply. Some other things we can do, for instance, with the custom action, we can say if reply chosen is cool beans, we can then call a custom event inside of our NPC actor. So I'll explain how this works. If we right click and search for add custom event, and we'll just call this test. Off of test, we'll just print an integer just to make sure this is working. Inside the custom event, we'll then just paste in that name of our custom event. And we can go ahead and hit play. If we now go ahead and select cool beans, we can see we're printing out that integer. So this is a way to sort of execute completely custom logic. If you have something very specific that needs to happen on a reply action, this can be done now by using the custom action node. I'll go ahead and cover some of the other ones as well. Let's go ahead and test the change display name node. Pretty self-explanatory. Once again, if the reply chosen is cool beans, we can just change the display name to something like Yuri friendly, and the color will be blue. One thing to note is we can stack these nodes. So for instance, if this reply chosen is cool beans, we wanted to change the display name, and we can also redirect the conversation at the same time. So we'll go back to hey there. So now the NPC's name will be changing to Yuri friendly, and we will be looping the conversation. So if we go ahead and test this, we select hey there and cool beans. Our NPC's name color changes and their name, and we are now looping the conversation. We can now jump onto the create group discussion. So this node is a little bit more advanced, but is useful when you are trying to set up dialogue between multiple NPCs. If we say the reply chosen is cool beans, we can then begin to link dialogue. So we'll add 2 pins. So we can consider each pin as manually selecting a reply from an NPC's data table. So for this example, we'll communicate with Bob. We can see this NPC over here, the ID is Bob. Inside Bob's dialogue, we have a if reply is chosen row named how are you today. So we can copy that over and paste that into the select reply. The ID can be Bob. So we're now selecting that reply from Bob's dialogue data table. After that line is spoken, we can then jump back to Yuri. And we can select the hey there reply. So we can compile and save and test this out. If we go ahead and select cool beans, we'll jump to Bob. He'll say his line, and then we will jump back to Yuri. So this is sort of how this example setup is done. So if we go ahead and start this conversation, we can see we're changing Bob's name on a reply, and then we are communicating between all 3 of these NPCs over here in a little conversation. So that's how group discussions are done. We can also go ahead and demonstrate some other ones over here, some other nodes. We have add consequential tag and remove consequential tag. That's pretty self-explanatory. When a reply is chosen, we add a con tag to the player. We also have the option to add a reply option. So we can go ahead and demonstrate this. So if reply chosen is cool beans, we're going to add it to a target reply. So for this example, we're going to be adding it to this second row in Yuri's dialogue. And the second row is executed when the reply is chosen, which is hey there. So that'll be our target reply. And the new reply we want to add is added example. And then just again, for this example, we can redirect conversation as well. So when cool beans is chosen, we can go back to hey there so that we can see those reply options prompted again. So when we select cool beans, we can see we have our added example reply option. So that's the basis of setting up custom reply actions using the dialog graph actor. A large collection of these nodes can be joined up together to create more diverse dialogue and more complex branching conversations between the player and NPCs. We can see here we have some example setups for you to reference when setting up your own NPCs. While we are on the topic of NPCs, something else I'd also like to mention is changing or the ability to change the subtitle style. So Story Framework includes 2 subtitle styles to choose from. We have raw and we have artistic. So if we go ahead and test this, we can see these subtitles change to a more, I suppose, stylized version, which can be optionally used. Some other useful information that I'd like to make mention of is if we have multiple dialogue cameras set up on the same NPC, the camera that is chosen will be random. So if we add a new dialogue NPC camera component and we change the position, just to demonstrate this very roughly, we can see now when we talk to the NPC, we have an equal chance of selecting between either camera. So this can be used to set up more diverse camera angles during conversation. It doesn't always need to stick to a specific camera angle. Story Framework's dialogue system also includes grunting for NPCs. So consider this sort of passive voice lines that can play when the player is near an NPC. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate how this works now. Inside core, if we go to dialog, if we go to blueprints and then other, we have NPC grunts. If we open this up and hit add to add a new row, we can target our Yuri NPC. We have different order methods to choose from. So we have no passive grunting, randomly select from entries without looping, and select in ascending order. We'll do select, or we'll do randomly select entries, no looping. We can then define intervals between these grunts. So this is in seconds. So between every 5 and 10 seconds, the NPC will grunt. And we can also define the range at which the NPC can grunt. So if we add a new grunt action here, we can again define body and head animations. Just to clarify, in case it wasn't obvious, the body animations will target the body and the head animations will target the head specifically. Generally, these are split up between 2 meshes. I'll go ahead and touch on this in a moment. So let's go ahead and set up an example. We'll say our NPC says grr when the player is near the NPC. Again, this would be replaced with your own voice lines. So this will happen every 5 to 10 seconds when the player is in range. We can go ahead and test this. We can go ahead and wait for this to happen. As we can see, Yuri is grunting at us. So if we have multiple reply or grunts set up, then we will select randomly between these grunts, or depending on the grunt order that we've specified. Some other neat things we can do is, once again, in the dialog blueprints other, we have reply styling as well. So as an example, we are finding the how are you today reply, and we can modify the background color and text color of the reply option. So this is demonstrated with Bob over here. If we go ahead and talk to Bob, we can see the how are you today is highlighted in blue, as we're using that reply styling and targeting the how are you today. If we go ahead and skip through this dialog, we can see this is also used again on the do you have something for me reply. So this is a nice way to add some color indication to reply options. So if we dive into the dialog manager to talk a bit more about how animations are played, we can see we are targeting for the body animations a skeletal mesh component with the tag body, and same thing with the head. So for instance, if we hop into our NPC, we can define these tags by just clicking on our mesh, and underneath component tags, we can add body. If we're using a meta-human, I'm pretty sure the head mesh is separated. So then that mesh, we would assign the head component tag. So that's how we define playing animations on the body and on the head separately. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how you can go about making use of Story Framework's dialogue system. It's it can be quite robust, or it can be very simple to use and set up NPCs. It all depends on your use case and how complex you'd like to get with the dialogue for your NPCs. Hopefully this was informative, and if you have any more questions regarding Story Framework's dialogue system, please do feel free to reach out via our Discord or to me privately via email. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.